All right. So now what we'll do is, we'll try to quickly mm, design this more item. Actually, this will be needed before the switch. So you can see that this more, when we hover over it, we see more options. For now, we will just focus on this more along with this arrow. Okay. And in case if you're confused how something is happening or what is the design, you can just always inspect it. So when I inspect it, I see, okay, this is a div, it has more, and then it has select drop down items. But anyways, we will not focus on this part. And then it has an after element, and this is the style, like it has this arrow key. Okay, so we will just follow similar structure. So let's add a quick div, and inside this div, let's see what exactly it is showing us. So more is as it is, I mean, it doesn't have any class or any tag, so we will have more as it is. And let's save it, and let's give it a class so that we could do the styling for this. You remember that we can also target directly, like navigation section dot the immediate div, like the way we discussed earlier. If I show you the example, it would be dot navigation sections and then direct div, and then we can do the styling in this way also. But let's have a class name, so that we get used to using more classes, because I would suggest that it is, if you mix lot of specificity rule stylings, then it will get little complicated and tricky for you to debug also. So let's name it as more. Now let's quickly style up this class, and let's remove this one. So one more important thing about here is that we will be using pseudo element. If you see this double colon, and after it is a pseudo element, you can always actually look into the pseudo elements, and you can figure it out. There are something called pseudo classes, like hover, active, when a link is active. You will get a lot of description about this, and the more you practice it, the more elements you use it. We will be using a lot of pseudo elements from here, but yeah, the more you use these elements, the more you will get a grip on it. Okay, so coming back, we have this more, and we can actually use a h2 tag to keep it in the same styles like we have in the above ones. So if I save it, and just let me confirm, because I need to check if here in how are we styling. I think we are not styling these any as of now, so it is fine. Okay, so now if I go back, it all looks in the similar format. And now what I'll do is I'll add a pseudo after element. Okay, so what I'll do is I'll put an after, but before putting it like this, we want again these pseudo elements are only can be only consumed in the container tags, like div h1, which can have child tags, not something like input tag. Input tag cannot have child element, right? Input tag, if I show you, let me quickly show how it looks like. So it is for input of elements. Like if I show you, and let me add a placeholder, enter text, something like this. So this looks like this. So we cannot place any further tag. This is a self-closing tag also, by the way. And this is similar to writing it like this. Okay, if you don't have anything inside, you can just close it directly here. So that is the difference. So you cannot add anything else, image tags and these kind of tags, where you cannot add additional fields. For that, pseudo elements won't work. Okay, so we have div, and now since we want it to be road, so first we will have to add a display flex and align items center, as always we do. And then now we can add the pseudo element. So more after pseudo element, which says find out the class more and apply the pseudo element to after. Okay, and then the content, I think we can just copy paste it from there. This arrow key, generally we can just take it directly from here instead of trying to find it at different places. And first let's save it, and we will see why we have this margin top. Okay, all right, so we have it here. Now you will see that even though we have aligned it center, there is a slight offset. Okay, and if you look carefully, if I just try to hover over it, yeah, so you can see that lengthwise both of them are almost similar. But this particular item, if I zoom it a little bit, you will see that it is taking some different space than what is expected. Okay, So if I go here, like let's say I add a border 2 pixels solid red. So now you will see that this pseudo element is basically something like this. So if I draw it here, so let's say this is the total space taken by any element, let's say an alphabet. So it will start, let's say A letter, so it will start and it will touch at the top. Okay, there is no what do you say, that vertical space that is left blank. Okay, however, in case of pseudo element, it starts at a very bottom point. Okay, like this. So if I change the color quickly, so if you see this whole space, is basically blank, and that is why it is causing us to make it look like that it is not properly aligned. It is aligned a little bit at the bottom side. Okay, so for that fix only, we have this property of margin top to minus 12.5%, basically pushing this further up so that it gets aligned with the actual text. So that's the idea. So let me just remove it and add margin top to minus 12.5% and save it, and let's go back and let's see what happened. So now you will see that it is kind of more aligned. Let me zoom out. So now it appears to be a little bit centered, a little bit more up, it seems like. So we can just reduce this negative value to make it even more further centered, and I think 10% or maybe 8% should work. Yeah, I think this looks fine, but you'll see that it is very close to more. So we can add some gap again. Just pause the video and think, what gap should I add for these two elements? If I show you in the Jamboard, let me clear the frame. uh, so I have this guy, which is my more text, like this, and I have this guy, which is my arrow button, like this, and this is the gap that I want to increase. Okay, so based on the flex box, all the flex practices that we did, just think whether it will be gap between two rows or gap between two columns. Okay, so pause the video and think of it if you cannot think quickly, but otherwise I'm continuing. So this is, anyways, you can see that this first one is your column. Yeah, this one is the first column, so we can assume this whole thing as one column, and then this whole thing as one column. So this is the gap between two columns. Okay, if these elements were something like this was my more text, and this was my arrow, then in this case the gap would have been this guy, this gutter. Okay, sorry, my bad, this whole part. And in this case it would have been gap between this row and this row. All right, so since it is a gap between two columns, so we will use a column gap. Okay, so column gap, and let's keep it as how much, 10 pixels. Let's start with 10 pixels and see how it looks. So now we can see it is having a lot of gap. Let's make it 5 pixels. I think this looks fine to me. Okay, and let's remove this input text because we don't need it. Okay, it was already removed but not saved. All right, so now we are somewhat closer to how it looks like. Now the next step would be to display these items on hover. Okay, all these items. So if we try to actually look into the classes, like this particular class, we can have a good idea of how this class is behaving. So we have these elements. So let's first create these elements. We want to show them only when we hover over it, right? So we'll figure out that logic later, but let's create the element so that it shows right away. Okay, so let's have another div. Let's name them as classes dot dropdown items. Okay, and here we will have all those elements. So let's say we have it in h3 format. So we have about, work experience, blog, videos. Okay, and then we have testimonials, then we have awards. I think that's all. What else is there? Contact, project, awards, video, testimonials, and tech stack. So contact, project, awards, video, testimonial, tech stack. So videos, testimonials and text tag. Okay. And now what we want to do is we want to make it appear directly next to this guy. So first we want to make sure that it is a column based display. So let's make it like this: display flex direction. Now notice that this time, since it's a column, by default the flex direction is always row, but when it is supposed to be column, we have to specify it here, and that's why we are doing it like this. Okay, so this is number 2. And let's have what is, if these are if the flex direction is column, then these all will appear in columns like this second case. So now this time we have to specify the row gap, that is gap between each of these rows. Okay, I know this is opposite, like flex direction in case of column we are using row gap, and in case of row we are using column gap, but this is how you are supposed to relate it. We have multiple columns. If the flex direction is column, then that means that it will come one after one, instead of instead of horizontal, it will come vertically. So these single elements are treated as one row, and the gap between each row is row gap. And similarly for the columns, when the flex direction is row, these elements come up as columns, so one element first and then other elements and so on. So these single entity would be treated as column, and that's why the gap between each column is the gap between each of these entities would be column gap. Okay, so let's keep the row gap as 10 pixels maybe, and save this one. And now if you see here, let's go there, you will see that it is coming after this more button, right? And we don't want it to be like that. We want it exactly next to more button. If you see here, if I scroll, it comes just next to this, right? And that's what we want here also. So for that, generally all these positions, we have to do something called positions. Okay, and if I go positions in CSS, you will see that there is a lot of documents about what positions you can use. So position property specifies the positioning method used for an element. Okay, by default it is static meaning wherever it is, just stack them one after other. Okay, in specific words, it is saying that elements are not affected by top, bottom, right and left properties. It just comes one after one based on the order. Okay, and it is always according to the normal flow of the page. Okay, now the other one is relative. So relative is basically, you add relative positioning when you have a parent container. Let's say so let's say this is my container. Okay, this is my parent container. So let me add a label called P, and you have another child container. When you have static, so child container, depending upon the row of the depending upon the orientation of the whole page. Let's say this is the primary body. Okay, I think I have done some so let's say this is your whole body. Okay, if you have applied any styles in body to stack the elements in horizontal or vertical direction, based on that, if you have a parent container and then you have a child container, if the position is static, then child container, let's say you have applied horizontal styling for this whole body. Okay, so let me quickly add one text here. Okay, so let's say you have added horizontal stacking. In that case, what will happen is the child container will come in horizontal to the parent container. Okay, so this is when the position is static. Okay, so let me add a C. So this is when it is static. Now let's say you want to keep the reference to this parent container. Okay, so the child container should be positioned relative to this parent container. In that case, you will add position as relative to this parent container. Okay, so you will apply position as relative to the parent container, and now depending upon the position of the child, you can now apply make this child position with respect to this parent container. So let's say you want to position this child with respect to this parent container in an absolute way, that it should follow exactly the positioning of this parent. So in that case, what you can do is you can add a position of absolute to the child. Now note that this is very important that you put the position relative to the parent container, otherwise this child would be absolute to this whole body. Okay, so this is very important. So you have to specify that parent has a relative position, so the child container can take absolute. Okay, and as long as you put absolute, then the child would be directly coming exactly sorry, not like this, exactly on the parent. Okay, so the child container will come like this. Now you can manipulate the position of child by adding further coordinates like top. Let's say top you put 50 pixels, and then bottom, not bottom, left, let's say you put 50 pixels, and so on. So if you put it like this, then this particular child container which is coming here, it will go 50 pixels from the left and 50 pixels from the top. So it will start, let's say if this is the point, so it will start somewhere from here. So that is how you can do absolute positioning. Okay, and this is what we will be using here, and you can give a read through it. Like there's a lot of details about relative positioning. Fixed positioning is the positioning that will make the make your element fixed to the page. It won't move no matter what. Okay, so that is where fixed positioning comes into the picture. Then you have lot of there is one more, sticky positioning, which is also something like it will keep it onto the page. So you can try these examples to understand how this works. So basically you will see that this is how sticky works. So once you scroll down, initially it is at a fixed position, but you don't want it to move. So as you scroll down, it sticks to the top. Okay, so there are a lot of positioning properties that you can make use of. Generally most of the times you will be using relative and absolute positioning, but these new options like fixed and sticky could also be kind of very helpful. Anyways, coming back, so here what we will do is, now in our case, if you see, we want this whole, let's first add some border so that we could see what exactly is happening. 1 pixel solid green maybe. So this is my box, and I want this box to be positioned relative to this more. Okay, so what I'll do is I will add position relative. Now I'm telling CSS to make this one as a relative point. You remember here this parent container is this, the one that we are discussing right now. Okay, and now what I'll do is I will put absolute positioning on this container and see what happens. So if I do position absolute, and if I save it, now you will see that this whole thing came within this what is it, came within the more button, and that is why it is it just tagged over this. Okay, and now let's have the offset. So let's say we have top of 50%. Instead of pixels, there are multiple units. Okay, and I thought I'll keep I think let's go with pixels for now. Let's see how it looks. So let me do it 50 pixels. So now you can see that it has shifted 50 pixels downwards, and I want to shift it to the left side also. So I can use right because I want to put it from right and put 50 pixels. So now you can see that it has come to the right, and let's say I want to reduce it 20 pixels or 0 pixels also, so it will look like this. Okay, and let's say I want to add some padding. So let's say 2 pixels in the top direction and 4 pixels in the sideways. So this is how it will look like. Let me make it 4 instead of 4. Let me make it 8 pixels. Yeah, so now you can see that it is appearing with respect to this box, and this is what we want. Okay, so now our more is having all this, and now in the next video we will focus on only showing this when we hover over it. Okay, so I hope you got this padding property. I hope you remember what this padding means. Top bottom 2 pixel, left right 8 pixel. Okay, let's say if I had, there are multiple, if let's say if I do 8 pixels, that will mean top bottom left right all 8 pixels. If I do 2 pixels 8 pixels 2 pixels, which means top 2 pixels, left right 8 pixels, bottom 2 pixels. So there are a lot of ways in which we can perform padding. Once you keep on practicing it, you will get used to it, but for now I think this is clear, and let's move on to the next video where we will try to display this box only when the user hovers over it. Okay, so until then, see you. Thank you very much.